Story number 10. I used to work in a state institution for the developmentally disabled. We were temporarily relocated to another building for remodeling of our building. Anyways, I was working one night. It was the second shift. We had locked down the units. I saw one of the residents walking down the hall. He was wearing a very distinct yellow t-shirt with a happy face on it. I went into the ward to let staff know they had an escapee. This was a serious situation because this particular resident, Larry, would ingest absolutely anything from clothing to pens to belts, literally anything. He was also very reluctant to go back to his home ward, hence why I didn't bring him back myself. He always needed 2 escorts. When we got back into the hall, less than 15 seconds later, Larry was gone. We searched the entire building, outside, downstairs, all wards. He was nowhere to be found. This whole search lasted less than 10 minutes because I had all the extra staff looking for him. I was just about to call the house supervisor to let her know that we had lost someone when out from the bathroom walks Larry with one of the staff. He had been getting his bath in the bathroom for the last 30 minutes or so. Kind of freaky. I was absolutely sure without a doubt that I saw Larry in the hallway. I never would have short-staffed the wards like I had if I hadn't seen him. Like I said, he was wearing a very distinct t-shirt. I took a lot of razzing that night. They all thought I was crazy. Anyways, I come to find out the next day that Larry had an identical twin brother who had died in that building 10 years previously. Story number 9. I used to work in an old labour and delivery unit. It was a small hospital, so oftentimes I was back there by myself. I like to keep the lights low and things quiet back there, so naturally I heard a lot of creeps and groans. There was a whole back hall unused. There was also no access to it except by passing me. I could hear metal objects clanging and doors shutting. Sounded like somebody was getting ready for a C-section. I could always sense that something was there with me. There was also a back room on the medical surgery floor that was never used. It was a patient room that was converted into a storage room. That room was strange. Call lights were always going off in there and nobody was near it. The whole hospital had a creepy aura. Maybe it was a cemetery next door, if that in itself was not strange. Story number 8. Growing up, I was convinced that my house was haunted. Well, my little cousin, she was about 10 at the time, I was 13, slept over one night, and we slept together on the pull-out couch in our living room. There is a long, narrow hallway that connects to that room, and I couldn't sleep all night because I swore I kept seeing something walk by at the end of it. The next morning I asked my cousin how she slept, and she said she couldn't sleep because she swore she saw someone at the end of the hallway. Suspicion confirmed. Story number 7. You know how when you are a child, the shadows of your furniture in your room make weird monster shapes and you think maybe they're real? As a little girl whose father made her watch things like Tremors and The Blob, I had a real imagination problem, but my parents tried to reassure me that there was no monsters in my room. One night when I was in 5th grade, I couldn't sleep. I looked at the end of my bed and there was another shadowy shape, but instead of looking like my boxy furniture, it had more of a person shape. I pulled my blanket over my head and I kept telling myself that it wasn't real, and I eventually fell asleep. The next morning there were police downstairs. Apparently someone had cut through the mesh part of the window and broke into our house. Nothing was stolen. They determined that he had only walked into my room and then left. Of course this had horrified me. I still to this day carry a knife around with me if I'm completely alone in the house. It didn't really end there though. A few nights later I was having a sleepover across the street. I remember that night because the clouds were moving by faster than I had ever seen. I watched them transfixed through a skylight. The next morning the police were at my house again. Apparently this person kept calling my house threatening to kidnap and kill me. And that particular night he broke in again to do just that. They caught him, and it turned out to be my next door neighbour, a 15-year-old boy with some mental illness. He was hospitalized and my parents had a 5-year restraining order on him. It was crazy that the neighbour attempted to kidnap me while I slept. Twice. Story number 6. About 6 years ago, I was in my final year of high school, and due to the weird timetable that 12th grade had at my school, we regularly had 2+ hour breaks between classes, early finishes and longer lunch breaks. My house was about a 20-minute walk away from school, and I would usually just walk home, either by myself or with a friend, and chill until we had to head back. My school was located on the outskirts of the city, and my house was a little bit further out. I lived on about 40 acres on a dirt road. Along the dirt road, I had been passing a really foul smell for about 5 minutes away from my house. I couldn't tell where the smell was coming from, but it was definitely close to the road. I had passed this smell about 4 times over roughly a week of school, but figured it was a dead animal due to the area. After an exam, I was walking home with a friend, and the smell was worse than ever, so as you do, we decided to walk into the grass to search for whatever the smell was. We ended up finding a black garbage bag that was completely blown up like a balloon about 5 meters from the road. As a joke, I threw a rock at it and it popped and shot out this foul white goo, and immediately my friend and I started dry reaching. We ran away as fast as we could, laughing and vomiting, back home to my place. I didn't think anything of it, as I figured it was a cat or something that someone had dumped. I remember walking back from school the next week by myself, and there were mounted police on their horses walking down the road slowly, and near one of the entrances to my property there was a dog squad with sniffer dogs walking around. I didn't take much notice of all the police and what they were doing, but literally as soon as I got closer to the area that we had found the bag, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach and I thought, oh shit. The bag ended up being the body of a girl who had been murdered and was dumped along the fence line of my property. I still feel sick when I think about it. Story number 5. In 2008, I was living with a bunch of people for university, a couple and 2 other guys. The couple broke up a few months after we moved in, and the tension was insane. After around 6 months, things started to calm down a bit, but then almost too much, sort of eerie. One night we all went out for drinks, leaving the guy alone in the house, who said he didn't fancy it. I came back home at around 2 AM with my girlfriend and was greeted by the creepiest thing I had ever seen. The house was sort of backlit and the stairs were visible as soon as you come through the front door. I hadn't turned on any lights, and I could see this figure lurking in the strangest pose on the stairs. I knew it was my housemate, so I began shouting, telling them how creepy it was, and was getting genuinely angry. Eventually I turned on the light to see he had hung himself from the banister. My instant reaction was to cut him down, so I ran and grabbed him while my girlfriend got a knife from the kitchen and cut him down. I also performed CPR while my girlfriend called an ambulance. Turned out he had been dead for around 3 hours. 3 years of heavy drinking for me. Story number 4. When I was in middle school, my friends and I were hanging out on a trampoline in the backyard late at night. It was around 11 PM or so. The backyards are all connecting, meaning there is trees and small fences separating them, but you can walk straight through them. Some guy comes through and asks if we have seen a small little orange tabby cat, and we told him no. He said he lives around the corner, and if we see it he will give us a reward. We think nothing of it and go back to talking about Pokemon cards and why Charizard is God on paper. No joke, 2 minutes after this guy leaves, this little cat wanders through and we think, is that the cat that he was talking about? My friend grabs it and we all proudly march to the guy's house to collect our reward. The guy is sitting on his front porch and we bring the cat to him. He's so excited and says, oh, I have a reward inside, just come in and I'll give it to you. We were kind of sketched out, but we decided 2 go in and 2 stay outside. He says, oh, if you don't come in, I can only give the reward to the ones that come in. He was gonna give us $100 per person to go inside. Still, we had 2 guys go in and take what felt like forever, but they came out and had $200 with them. They said there was plastic on everything in there and something felt wrong. I feel as though if we all went in we would have been killed, but keeping 2 outside that knew where their friends were, I guess was enough to deter him. That was a weird occurrence. Story number 3. Last year a guy came to my house around 9 o'clock at night. He knocked and I got my mum and she went out to see what was up. By the way, we live in a very rural area, so visits that late at night are extremely uncommon and strange. The guy talked to my mum about how he was opening a business and asked whether she liked American made products. Then he handed her a Clorox container with a sample. He went back to his minivan and opened it to get a vacuum cleaner when my mum saw 5 other men sitting inside. She told me to run and get my phone since we didn't have a landline. I couldn't find it, so I got my knife and I stood around the corner. She threw the container outside and told them to get the hell off her property, as well as that she was calling the cops. They peeled out of the driveway and we never saw the car again. 2 months later, my mum found a single bearded guy putting filled garbage bags by the back door. She asked him what the hell he was doing, and he responded by saying, "This is for your little girl, my little sister." Again she told him to get the hell out, and then went through the bags. They were filled with garbage like dirty clothes and empty tampon containers, which was strange. Story number 2. And just keep in mind, this story really creeped me out. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio and shows, and she would talk loudly to somebody. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened the door and I got a quick peek inside her house. All her walls in her house had crosses painted on them in different colours, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow stained, 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and I see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at her sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating. At this stage, I'm basically pooping myself. I call the cops and they know all about her. Apparently she is a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 AM to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops and there are 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute it's like she was never there. I never see her again. However, I still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep. Story number 1. The unexpected guest. My aunt experienced something strange when she was home alone, when she heard someone open the front door and walking into the hallway. Since her husband was not supposed to get home in a few hours, she went downstairs to see if someone was there. She did not see anybody, but outside the door she saw footsteps in the snow leading to the door, but not away from it. This made her nervous, and on a second glance she saw an unfamiliar pair of shoes in the hallway. She ran upstairs and called the police, and when they came to the house and searched through the house thoroughly, they found a homeless man hiding in a storage room, holding my uncle's shotgun, but luckily he had not found the ammunition as it was hidden in another place. He was arrested, but according to my aunt it was the scariest thing she had ever experienced.